Hi, I'm Alex.
And I'm Shane.
And this is the RPM podcast.
So welcome back, guys. This is episode number 2. Well, actually, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably our 5th video, but this is our second post-race review. And what a race it was. It was the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Well, before we get into things, let's go to some questions from our viewers, a little segment we call View from the Stands. Our first question is from Dave Doherty.
Hi guys, a question for you both. With the Monza Grand Prix coming up, and of course they're subject to on Lewis Hamilton himself, do you think this is a season where Hamilton will beat the Schumacher record on the 91 wins, or maybe go beyond it? Because it looks like he's going to do it since he did since he achieved that in the Belgian Grand Prix. That's my question for you both. And your show's fantastic, and keep it going. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the answer to this question about whether or not Hamilton can beat Schumacher's record on wins, yes, absolutely, definitely.
Not a shadow of a doubt that he won't. I mean, we've just watched the Monza Grand Prix, and yes, he didn't
shadow
win
of a
it,
doubt
but...
that he will, you mean?
Oh, yes, yeah. Sorry, been a long day. But there's 8 or 9 races left in the season, and he has to win 2 more, I believe. Potentially 1.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure, but 2.
It's
2
91 to equal. Yeah.
Blimey. So yeah, I would put all the money I have that he would equal Michael Schumacher's record at least by the end of the season. There's no reason why he shouldn't do. He's on top form. The car's performing well. There's not really much else to say about that, but thank you very much for sending that video in. It's really great to hear your comments. We've received a lot on YouTube and Twitter, but having an actual video come in is really good. It means we get to meet you guys in virtual reality, not in virtual reality, but on the virtual world.
Cyberspace makes me sound about 40 years old.
We'll go with it though. Sounds great. So
it's retro.
Keep them coming in.
Retro is in.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thanks very much for your video, Dave. So, wow. What a race. Historic race.
Blown. Literal mind blown.
Don't even know. Well, I do know where to start. We're going to try and go through this more or less in order of as it happened in the race. We're going to go through the journey of this incredible race that we witnessed.
Relive it.
Starting, we are. We're going to go through, take those steps again. I'm going to stand up for the whole second half of this podcast, just like I was when I was watching the race. I could not sit down.
Oh, man.
Okay, so let's start with what happens just on the immediate lead up to the race. We've just had these engine mode changes. The vibe is that, it's just had no impact, and if anything, it's made Mercedes even better. But we actually saw the impact in the race instead. That was where it actually had an impact. Disappointing qualifying result for Renault. I expected them to do a lot better.
I'm a little bit disappointed as well. And I put both Renault drivers in my fantasy F1 thinking that they were going to have a solid result just like Spa. It did not happen. Mind you, no matter what I did, I probably wasn't going to get the result I was expecting going into Monza, the temple of speed, and not see who we didn't see on the podium. Oh, it makes me happy just thinking about it.
Albon much improved as well.
Yes, definitely.
In his showing compared to Verstappen. I think it was about 0.3 between them in qualifying.
That's not bad at all.
Not great for them, but yeah, that's more the kind of gap you expect. Like Max is obviously a top tier driver. Albon doesn't have to be necessarily as good as Max, but he's got to be within that window where he can be a teammate and not just another car somewhere a bit further back.
Yeah, I mean he's improved throughout the season. Start of the season, he started off being 6, 7 tenths behind, and now to be within 3 tenths of, I think we can agree with a very good driver. Max isn't just a driver. He's an excellent driver, and he's been pushing that Red Bull to its full potential and more in some places. So to get within 3 tenths, I think that's exactly where he needs to be. So yeah, he gets a lot of criticism, but it's done well. Did well this qualifying.
Now we've seen a lot of statistics and facts and stuff coming out in this Grand Prix because of how historical it is. And another one getting broken after qualifying is that this was Vettel's worst ever start at Monza. He even started better in his first Italian Grand Prix for Toro Rosso. He started 16th and he started 17th. It's the worst ever grid position for Vettel.
It didn't get much better either.
I know that's not good news, but sorry.
It was
and it
almost
didn't get any better. No,
It was almost good that there was no fans there because Ferrari didn't have
and
a
he
great
said that
weekend.
too, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Sebastian
he did.
said that.
Mm. And obviously we'll get onto that, but sticking to qualifying, I think it was very good. Wasn't as completely barbaric as last year.
Yeah.
Although there were some close calls with incidents. I'm not gonna lie, I saw Hamilton coming down the penultimate straight, coming out of the Ascari chicane.
Scary.
And he had 2 wheels off the track to get past the queue of cars for the last turn, looking for the pit straight. Yeah, mad. It shouldn't happen. Like, one car went out. I think it was Sainz who went out straight away and was just like, you know what, I'm going to go for my lap. Or it might have been Ricardo, actually. Ricardo was like, you know what, I'm going to go for my lap. Don't need any other cars. I want a nice, clean lap. Don't want to look like an idiot. And the rest of them just... I know.
Also complaining about that.
Yeah, it's difficult because it's a very power dependent track, and you get a couple of attempts with the toe, so it's all to play for. But actually, if this race showed anything, it's not all to play for in qualifying. Don't get points for qualifying, get points in the race. So stop clowning around and causing accidents, well, almost potentially causing accidents. Get on with it, and then fight in the race. And I know that.
Is there anything that can be done to avoid this sort of thing in the future? Do you think? Like,
I don't know. Norris made a good. Well, I wouldn't say it's a. Sorry, I wouldn't say it's a good point or a bad point, but his point was maybe if this is going to happen in future, then release the cars with a 10-second gap or 5-second gap on constructor championship order. So just out of the pits, every 5 seconds another car goes, leaving adequate space.
Yeah.
But then that doesn't stop them slowing down on the track. The FIA put a time delta on the track for the slowest lap time, and they introduced that for FP3. And yet there were cars going slower than the time delta in FP3, but nothing was done about it. It was managed better in qualifying, but yeah. I don't know. What do you think? Can anything be done about it?
It's hard to know how to change it in such a way that it doesn't spoil the overall strategy that comes with qualifying. I mean, it's really only this track that it happens at. Do we really want to damage qualifying overall just to save this going on in Monza? I don't know. It is bloody dangerous, like places.
But it's good to watch as well. Like it's an interesting qualifying session. But you mentioned the word strategy there, and I don't want to hang around on qualifying too much, but I said this to my other half when we were watching it. Everyone was just waiting for Mercedes to come out the garage, and then everyone else
sat there like, you go first. You go first.
It was just after you. And for you audio listeners, I'm literally just waving at myself. It's just like we had 9 pit engineers standing outside waiting for Mercedes to make that call. And because they're the furthest up the pit lane, the majority of other cars managed to get out before they even got to the exit of the pit. So, interesting. Very controversial. Just like the pit lane. Oh, so much to talk about. But that's all I've got to say on qualifying. Mad qualifying. Really exciting stuff. A little bit dangerous. Just need to behave a little bit more.
Yeah, that's the Temple of Speed for you. So yeah, that's qualifying. With the just before the very beginning of the race itself, 2 little things. Firstly, we already spoke about how this is going to be the last race with Frank and Claire Williams
at
the helm of their team, and obviously there was lots of emotions around that, and thank yous and goodbyes in the cockpit at the end of the race. So we'll come to those. There was a kind of an interesting thing that we saw no Vettel or Hamilton at the end racism ceremony. I think there was like a miscommunication or something. And Hamilton was in the John or something. I don't really think it's necessarily a big deal. It's not really a good look for Hamilton. Like I made a big deal about them doing this ceremony and then he's not there.
Yeah, of course. He's a big rep for that. I didn't realize this.
He's the reason it's happening.
Yes, exactly, which is
great.
Don't get me wrong. But then make sure you're on time for it, or just get that schedule in place. I didn't realize this happened until post race because I came home from work and then fast forwarded through the whole build up. If I was at home, I would have watched a 2-hour build up, probably watched a Formula 2 and Formula 3. I would have noticed it, but it was only when I was looking through Twitter at the end, I was like, oh blimey, this happened, and I didn't even see it. Not that there's much to see. He just did he turn up eventually, or was he just late?
I didn't see him.
Oh, interesting. And Vettel wasn't there either.
Because it doesn't last that long, does it?
It's less than a minute, I believe, because it's just before the national anthem, isn't it?
Yeah. So they, I think I didn't see him. Maybe they turned up late, but when I didn't see him on the actual program itself. So
fair enough. Well, yeah.
I think that's about it for the race notes in terms of the pre-race.
The pre-race build-up. And now on to the race.
I'm just struggling to think of how to even begin with this with
I
this race.
saw somebody very well summed it up on Twitter. They were like, lap 0 or lap 1 to lap 27, standard 2020 script. Lap 28 to 52, absolutely mental. Crazy scenes. Like, that was 2 races. We could have had a real boring race, but actually we had an absolute cracker.
I thought the start of it was good.
Yeah, it wasn't it was good, but it just got overshadowed by the fantasticness, if that's even a word, of the second half. And it was almost exactly halfway, wasn't it? Actually, lap 27 is exactly halfway of the Italian Grand Prix, so it was a tale of 2 halves. But you start. I've got my race notes here. So you start. You take us through that opening lap.
Okay, so obviously we kick off straight from lights out, and just Bottas has a terrible start and Sainz has a brilliant start. It manages to get up into P2 straight away. Both McLarens had a really good start, actually. And that was also true for both Renault as well, and boded well from the start of the race. Ricciardo ended up getting past Bottas into Ascari.
Yep.
Bottas was just falling down the pack. He just didn't seem to have any traction. He went wide in the Lesmos. He was complaining about a puncture.
Puncture which never materialized.
He was complaining about the car moving to the side in certain places. So I don't know what was going on there. Nobody seems to know. But Bottas just absolutely threw it away right there and then.
Yes.
And it didn't really improve after that. He just wasn't able to come back. And then, another poor start for Albon as well, because he made contact, ended up with a penalty.
Missed the first corner.
We didn't really see much of the Red Bulls at all. I've never seen the Red Bulls be so absent in a race. What did you make of the opening stages? I thought it was a big shake-up. There was quite a lot going on.
It was. There was a lot of position changes. Bottas and Norris touched ever so slightly. And Bottas, like you said, reckoned he got a puncture from that, or a slow puncture, but turned out his pressures were absolutely fine. Magnussen pitted at the end of the opening lap. He was involved in an incident at the first chicane. So that might have been with Albon, to be fair. I'm not quite sure, because Albon was down in P15 by the end of the first lap. So not a great start for him, especially after a good qualifying session. That was a shame.
Well, it was Gasly. Yeah, Gasly and Albon had contact, and that could have obviously made the race go very, very differently. So, yeah, he obviously suffered some kind of damage to the floor, I believe, that may have troubled him. But also, it was just not a good start. I think he was down. Yeah, he was down 6 places by lap 1. Yeah,
yeah, it's not good for Bottas, especially as he needs to be capitalizing on any mishaps or incidents or penalties Hamilton gets. And I know hindsight's a fantastic thing, but actually, if you really want to challenge for that championship, that drivers' championship, you need to be ready to pounce at any given moment. And that was, such a strong point to make, especially in this race where it could have been Bottas's, hands down. It should have been. By rights. It should have been his. Yeah, exactly. By rights, it should have been his to win. But
he needs to get back onto Hamilton. He gets this golden opportunity, and it's bottle it Bottas all over again.
Throwing it away. Hamilton was quite lucky, given the end result that Max retired and Bottas finished 6th, and Bottas finished 5th, I believe, and Hamilton finished 7th.
Yeah.
So actually, there was only probably 3 or 4 points in it. So just not enough to make that dent. Whereas if Bottas had finished first, would have been something to talk about. But
yeah, 4 points, I think, because 10 and 6, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So first couple of laps were okay. Lots of overtaking, which is really good to see. Verstappen got Stroll under braking in the first chicane on the 2nd or 3rd lap, which was good because the Red Bull driver did go backwards again on the first lap. Both of them did. The racing points come through strong on the first couple of laps as well. So just lots of chaos, lots of overtaking. It was a really good start to the race. But McLaren's in P2 and P3.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. I was
it's like the good old days.
And I was so impressed at how comfortable Sainz looked in P2 during the opening stages. This wasn't a guy who was like, oh no, there's someone behind me, I've got to defend every corner. He was just cruising.
He had a 3-second lead He had a 3-second lead to Norris, who had like a
Yeah.
2-second lead over P4, which was just a
Great
comfortable
teamwork as well.
McLaren 2-3. Yes, and they never come anywhere near each other. Well, not because the opportunity didn't present itself, but they respect each other so much. They gave each other room, and they see the bigger picture. They see constructor points, whereas other drivers would go for personal gain. So, very good start to the race. And moving on, the first thing I can think of, which was pretty big, was Vettel's brake failure. I can't remember what lap that was on, but it was pretty early on in the race. It was within the first
lap
10
6,
laps.
that was.
Lap 6, it was that early on. Blimey, let me get my race notes up.
I found it kind of amusing when I saw Vettel blasting through those polystyrene blocks at first, because I thought it was just him like, screw it, I'm just gonna drive through.
You know what? It was
That's
crazy.
What I thought it was.
I was quite lucky. I managed to watch P1, P2, not P1, P2. Practice 1, 2, and 3. And we've seen all weekend drivers lock up into that corner, lock the front right. It's under heavy load. You're approaching that corner at 214 miles per hour, in qualifying trim, and they'll just go through. But to see him go straight on with no reduction in the speed whatsoever and then blast through these polystyrene arrows, I was like, what the hell's going on? I was like, this is crazy. Looking back at
brake wire explosion or something,
looking back at the telemetry, the brakes did work. It took him from like 206 to 180, which isn't much of a deceleration, but clearly enough to get around the next corner, which was obviously, it's a long right-hander, which was good for him. But he did well to manage that situation as well as he did. I'm not sure many other drivers would have. I don't know. What happens when your brakes fail at 200 miles per hour? It's crazy, right?
Yeah, you just have to. Yeah, he had the opportunity to kind of keep going through the Curva Grande, and I think the tricky bit was coming back into the pits because obviously he couldn't brake, so he had to come in really slowly.
I was surprised that he continued that lap. There's plenty of runoff areas, plenty of slip roads at Monza.
I think if you can bring the car back, though, they always want you to do it. They always want you to bring the car back. Firstly, because no disrespect to marshals, of course. I mean, they do an amazing job, but I sometimes wonder if teams want to keep the cars from being taken by the marshals because they don't treat it very gently. That's what I'm thinking.
It's like they forget that these are multiple £1 million cars.
We saw what happened with Leclerc's car after his crash and it kind of flopping around. I know it was difficult to extract, but it's things like that where you're like, I kind of see why they always say, can you bring the car back? Because they always say that, don't they?
They do.
They always say that.
And it brings back to, was it Singapore
Maybe I'm wrong,
or
that's
Baku?
The reason, but
It was Singapore or Baku when the pickup truck went underneath the stanchion and hit the stanchion, and I was like, "This is why."
That was amazing.
This is why the cars come back to the pits.
Maybe measure the height of the truck. Maybe
it's mad, isn't it? You think that'd be like the first thing I'll do? Oh, can you underneath the stanchion? No. I tell you what, go out there anyway.
Just do it.
It's only a Williams.
Just put your foot down.
Yeah, floor it.
So yeah, that was. I mean, we're laughing because it is funny, but I just don't even know what to say about Sebastian Vettel. Like, I think he knows that he's just got to ride, just be along for the ride, basically.
Yeah.
He wants to get off Mr. Bonotto's wild ride, is what he wants to do.
And it just keeps on getting crazier, right? Like last week was a pretty terrible week for Ferrari. They had a double no point scoring. That did not make any sense, but you know what I mean. They didn't score any points for the first time in a very long time. Didn't go down very well. And then they come to this track with probably worse pace. It wasn't great. And it just got worse. Like Vettel said, it was a good job there wasn't any fans there because it was laughable. But then there would have been, if there were fans there, what an amazing result. It would have been amazing. It's just... for those of you who aren't watching this on YouTube, I've constantly got a smile on my face because this Grand Prix is everything I want in Formula 1 in 23 laps. So I'm glad it
was magical.
It was amazing. I've never felt like that about a race in so long. Like you said, on the edge of your seat stuff.
Yeah, it was a really special race. And I want to talk a little bit about. I want to get a little bit philosophical about it at the end. Maybe not in the way that you might expect, but
okay. I look forward to it. I love hearing what you think.
Just about the kind of the state of like thinking about races in this way. But I want to keep going with the race discussion itself. So we were talking about Vettel. That was lap 6.
That was lap 6.
Going back to Red Bull. So Albon ended up with a time penalty, didn't he, on lap 8? He failed to leave a car's width.
Yes, and I wasn't quite sure.
Racing Point, possibly Perez.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
At the time, I didn't understand why, and then they showed a replay, and I was like, "Well, that makes perfect sense." He really did squeeze the Racing Point off the track, which was pretty dangerous.
It does highlight the rather questionable response from the stewards to Leclerc's defence against Hamilton last year, though, because what Leclerc did was arguably much worse, and he just got a black and white flag, and it was a bit like, "Ooh, Italian Grand Prix, you know, maybe we shouldn't like penalise the Ferrari." That was the vibe that one got from it, and I know it's a different season, but like I don't think the rules have changed on that. You know, that really highlights how questionable that lack of penalty was there.
Yeah, there is a little bit indecisive and, you know, inconsistent between seasons and sometimes between races, but that's a whole RPM roundup right there, talking about the rules and regulations. Maybe we'll get onto that. Just a quick...
We're going to do a 16-hour special where we go over the entire technical
and then we're going to do a 20-hour special on the reg flag rules and whether you should be able to change your car's components in it. Look forward to that, ladies and gentlemen, because it will be happening. I'm calling it right now. Just a correction. It was Grosjean Albon had an issue with. It wasn't it wasn't a Racing Point.
Remembered it wrong.
I've just seen that on my notes. But yeah, it was similar to last year. It had less of an impact than last year, but had a much severer penalty. So yeah, just a note. Like you said, this is all about our thoughts and opinions, and our thought was, you know, same thing happened last year, and nothing happened last year, and it was pretty severe this year. So there's that. Moving on.
Also, Magnussen had a problem, right? Magnussen ended up 30 seconds behind or something by lap 9.
I think he boxed lap 1, didn't he? So that he was already 25 seconds behind the Williams.
I wasn't really sure what caused that. I didn't see what happened.
I think he had a contact on turn 1. It wasn't televised though, but he did have contact turn 1 and had to box on lap 1. So he was already 30 seconds off the pace by lap 2, which is a shame because not doing much racing at the moment. And he certainly didn't do much racing this weekend.
Were you pleased that there was no fan screen at this race?
Yes, I was, to be fair. Thank you
There
very
was
much.
no fan screen.
Yeah, although, yeah, exactly. No, I'm very pleased because...
There was like a collage on some of the sideboards.
Actually, Vettel and Leclerc's faces were in those crowds, those fake crowds.
Yeah.
Which I think I mentioned fake crowds last week, and, you know, they've done it. Not saying it was me, but I'm glad to see that we're moving with the suggestions.
We're just going to assume the check's in the post.
Yes, that is... I won't say my address. But, yes, I'm glad there wasn't a fan screen because this race was so it was so peculiar. It was so strange, amazing, magnificent, like so different. No one would have ever thought that was going to happen. So whatever they played, unless it was live, would have been so false, it would have been unreal. Like, you said you were standing up for the whole 27 laps. I was on the edge of my seat scoffing like biscuits. It was ridiculous. Like, it was it was
They should
mad.
put that on the fan cam.
We should do. There you go. Sponsored by RacePerMinute.
Where's the just sort of like, just lounging around in your pants watching F1? Where's that on the fan
which
cam?
I know a lot of us do.
That's not
real. How terrible. But yeah, moving on. I've got down here, my next post-race discussion is Hamilton sets fastest lap after fastest lap after fastest lap.
Yes, he was
went
doing that.
Purple every other lap. It was ridiculous. He wanted it, didn't he? He really went for it. He was pulling out 0.8 of a second over Sainz.
Does Hamilton drive another way? Like, is there another way that Hamilton drives? I don't. No. All I ever see is just maximum pace. So
yeah, and it was very well done. Like, it didn't have any issues with the tyres for the first half of the race. I'm not saying he had any issues on the second half, but it wasn't really relevant. But no tyre issues for Mercedes, which was good. It was running out.
No tyre issues, but it was Bottas. I mean, both cars were kind of having trouble with the slipstream because they were having overheating problems. But obviously, Hamilton spent the race in front of everybody. Apart from after, obviously we'll get to that. But he spent the first part of that race just in front of everyone, so he didn't have the same problems as Bottas, who couldn't make up places. Like, Bottas just wasn't able to do it for whatever reason. But then, of course, later on when Hamilton is going through the field, you're thinking, well, why wasn't Bottas able to do that?
Makes a very good question. I know Bottas had a little bit of damage to his car, but Bottas was stuck behind a Racing Point and a Renault for a while. And I can understand it was Hamilton looked like he was going to get issues when he was going to overtake Perez in the Racing Point, because it was Mercedes versus Mercedes, and yet he just breezed straight past like a lap later. So,
and we know that they weren't using special engine modes.
They have to. All the Mercedes engines have to be using the exact same mode now, so it should be identical. But yet Hamilton managed to overtake 9 cars in the last 27 laps from after his 10-second stop and go, which was a bit harsh if you ask me, but we'll get onto that.
I completely disagree.
Oh, interesting. This podcast is going to be long, isn't it?
Hey, we'll get to that.
We're
jumping ahead of ourselves.
I'm so sorry.
But we've done, so Hamilton was setting all those fastest laps. He was totally in control of the race.
Yep.
Then the next kind of major, there's a few little things like we see Leclerc, I believe. I see Leclerc was behind Raikkonen for some time, I believe.
Yep.
And wasn't able to get past. And that was kind of like, again, emblematic of the problems with Ferrari. Norris was doing very well under pressure from Perez, and he managed to get out of his DRS range eventually. And again, that was a really good drive. But I don't really have much else. I mean, I noticed that Kvyat was the only car that started on hards, I believe, and so he struggled a bit earlier on, and then found himself behind Gasly.
Yep.
And I think there was a little bit of hoo-ha there about the fact that he wanted to be let past.
A lot of people thought he should have been, given the different strategies, but racing's racing at the end of the day. The only other thing I've got down here before Magnussen reports something broke is the copious amounts of complaints Bottas was putting over the radio.
He sounded rattled, didn't he?
He
sounded quite rattled.
Not happy at all, and clearly weaving on the straights to try and get some cool air into that engine. So big issues for that car, especially number 77. I think he said, "I can't race with these engine settings. It's a joke." Well, it's like Bono, my tyres are dead all over again.
Yeah.
It's just it was a bit repetitive, but
maybe this is part of his secret plan to beat Hamilton. He's going to just he's just going to try and copy all of his like stereotypes and idioms.
All right, next thing
in order to beat Hamilton, I have to think like Hamilton.
Yeah.
Bono, I mean, the other guy.
Yeah, who is the other guy? I don't know who that.
I keep looking, I keep thinking I should really try and remember the name of Bottas's engineer, and I look it up and then I instantly forget.
Yeah, it's not James. James is the guy above the engineer. He's the strategist, isn't he?
James Vowles, yeah.
Yeah, he's a strategist. Yeah, he's got a hard job, that guy. I don't envy him at all.
Right, I think it's time.
Is it time for Magnussen?
Lap 20. Kevin Magnussen pulls over in front of the pit lane, basically on the side to the side on the grass. There's not enough room. He has some kind of engine problem, I believe they found out.
Something broke.
And they couldn't pull him back. They couldn't pull him behind because there wasn't enough space for the car to go through the gap that was between the barriers.
There was a picnic bench drilled into the floor, which is why they couldn't get that car back.
I thought it wasn't wide enough. The impression I got was that it wasn't wide enough, or it wasn't a safe width.
Shouldn't be there if it's not wide enough.
Yeah, I don't know. Well,
no, anyway, we won't hang around on that.
So picnic bench thing going on.
Picnic bench gate. So they decided to push the car about 100 meters down the verge of the pit straight.
And the pit lane closed as a result the moment the safety car was called out.
Yes.
Now, as I understand it, a notification of this is given to all of the teams, but via their information, obviously, I don't get to see it. So, but there is some kind of notification that comes in, but it's not like it flashes up in the middle of the screen and goes, all right, the pit lane's closed.
Well, it flashed up on our screen. So if we're getting that information as the viewers, then surely the pit strategists and the engineers and the team principals will be getting that notification very promptly.
Yeah.
Well, before us.
So safety car's out, pit lane's closed. We immediately see Hamilton comes into pit. Now, if the radio conversations are anything to go by, they told him to box as he was coming after the safety car happened, because they said safety car box. Hamilton wanted hards, but for some reason they said it was too late to change and that they were going to go to mediums. And then it seems that as he was coming into the pits, literally as he's about to enter and slow down and hit the pit limiter, they say that the pit lane's closed. They do tell him that the pit lane's closed way too late. Way too late. And Mercedes paid the ultimate price for that mistake.
They did. Now, when I first saw this, I thought, when I saw safety cars come out, I thought, friggin' hell. Hamilton has just gone past the pit lane again. He's going to be one of those people who gets shafted by being on the wrong place at the wrong time. And I was like, oh no, I'm wrong. He's just before the pit lane. This is a brilliant strategy call by Mercedes. He's come in. Then it flags up on our screen, pit lane now closed, because all the teams rushed out and then they were all just standing around like lost children at a supermarket, just like pointing and, looking at each other really blankly. And to our light, it came up that the pit lane was then closed. And yeah, Lewis Hamilton came in, got serviced, then went back out, rejoined in P3, I think, which is tremendous. That just goes to show how much of a lead he had.
Yeah.
And then
Giovinazzi came in as well.
Giovinazzi came in, but what felt like 15, 20 seconds later. So I can understand a little bit why Mercedes got a little bit, confused, or they only had like 15 seconds to react. And you can chuck as many excuses in there as possible. But Mercedes had a shorter amount of time than the Alfa Romeo. The Alfa Romeo was just like, you know what? Pit lane's closed. We can get a really good pit stop. Let's just crack on.
No one else is going to come in the pit lane. It'll be great. We'll gain loads of time.
Absolutely mad. So yeah, Lewis rejoined in P3 behind the McLarens. And then did it go on for a bit? Can't remember what happened.
So the red flag.
Oh, it was caused by Leclerc, wasn't it?
Was caused by Leclerc.
So
we went on for about. So there was the safety car. Went. I can't remember for the life of me how many laps it was out, but I don't think we went racing for more than 2 laps.
No,
I'm sure it was 2 laps after that safety car came in. We went racing again. Then Leclerc had his accident on lap 26
because the penalty didn't come through until with the whole track had been red flagged, race suspended. It came through in that. It was after that period.
It was all under investigation.
Exactly. So that's why Hamilton didn't box straight away. That's why it was all kind of back to normal. Let's go to Leclerc's crash then. How horrific did that look?
Big accident, yeah.
The magnitude of that impact and the way it just deformed those tires, it was just crazy. Like the whole car lifted. I say this on Twitter every time someone has an accident. I said it last week when, the halo was a fun, helped George in that accident, and Giovinazzi was absolutely fine. But this week just goes to show that those cars are built to incredible safety standards, because you're coming out that corner, you're going around that corner 160, 170, just looking at the onboard telemetry for qualifying and the practice sessions. That was a big impact, and I tell you what, it did not look like he slowed down in the slightest going into that wall. I thought, to be fair, he had a brake failure going into that wall because he didn't slow down at all. The gravel didn't slow him down. And I've said that 3 times now, but it was such a huge accident. And to see him get out and walk, he jogged back to the pits. He skipped back to the pits, and that's probably the adrenaline kicking in. And he's been cleared. He's absolutely fine. So we can laugh about this now. But at the time, I thought, Christ, this is serious. I'm surprised they've televised that.
Yeah, I mean, what I saw, like, was just kind of, it just caught the tail end of the crash. It was like literally they just saw it, and the accident itself seemed to come from him losing the back end coming into the parabolica. Initially, obviously, there was thoughts of, maybe the same thing happened to him that happened to Vettel, brake failure. But yeah, it just seemed that he just lost the back end and overcorrected. And yeah, hit the gravel. It made no difference whatsoever. So that obviously brought about a red flag because they needed to replace the barrier.
Yep, because there was significant damage to that.
Yeah, if it happened again, then the next driver that did it might not be so fortunate.
Well, they wouldn't be going into tyres, would they? They'll be going into what's behind it. And it's either a metal railing or a concrete barrier. So
yeah, so then we get a red flag on lap 27 to do that. The first red flag at Monza since 1995.
Oh, wow. Good stat there.
Who won the Italian Grand Prix in 1995, Shane? He's Googling it.
I have no idea. I have no idea. I was 1. I'm so sorry. This is where my knowledge of Formula 1 just disappears. Who won the Grand Prix
I
in
think-
1995?
I
Don't
think
I
it was
think-
Johnny. I think it was Johnny Herbert.
Oh, okay. Okay, I can see where you're going. Okay, that's fine. Wow. God, that
If
long
I'm
ago.
wrong, then somebody please shout at me in the comments.
I really hope you're wrong, so someone just corrects you in the comments after you put
I
me
want
on
it
the
to be in
spot.
all caps. Don't be nice.
Yeah. You're wrong. But yeah, red flag. And how long was it red flag for? It was quite a while, wasn't it?
Yeah, about.
35 minutes, it looks like. Track reopened at...
Was it 35 minutes? Okay, I was trying to think back to it.
Oh, track reopened at 15:20 our time, and it was red flagged at 14:54. So 25 minutes.
And we had a standing start. Yes.
Yes.
Let's
How
do
good was
standing
that?
starts, please.
Absolutely.
No, please don't do rolling starts. They're rubbish.
Completely agree. Yeah, it was, and they're not allowed to talk on the outlap at all to their race engineer. There's no communication until they've pulled away from that grid spot. So, absolutely, I'm all for that. That's racing, all on the driver.
But of course, this we'll come to the Hamilton penalty, because I think the first thing to talk about is, obviously that wasn't the only thing that happened whilst the red flag, whilst the session was stopped. Because of course, as we've touched on very briefly, the teams were able to, you can swap out components on a car as long as they are verified by the FIA as being identical, which is what Mercedes were trying to do for Bottas' car. And of course, you can change your tyres without having to take a pit stop. Now, this is important because it's important for Gasly, because he stopped already. He had stopped before the red flag. He'd stopped before the safety car, in fact. So he had stopped, and that had allowed Kvyat to go past him. So that was good for Gasly. And of course, Stroll found himself in the enviable position, of being able to change his tyres and then start the race from second.
It was
right?
second, yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't do too good on the restart, which is why he dropped back. But
he did absolutely terrible on the restart.
yes, yeah, I wasn't trying to be.
He blew his chance to win this race. He could have won this race. Right.
A lot of people could have won this race, and Gasly did.
Yeah. But I think in order of people, it started off as Hamilton who had the best chance, obviously.
Yep.
Then Bottas had the best chance. He blew it.
Did he ever have that best chance? Like after lap one, did he?
Well, it was before lap one really got going that he had his chance. That was how quickly it melted away.
It was turn two. He lost that opportunity.
On the grid, he had the second best chance.
Yeah, so let me take it back. Saturday, he had the second best chance, and he ruined it.
That's true, I guess. Yeah,
but let's not dive into Bottas's bottleness.
Yeah. So then we had Stroll. It was really his best chance. He was there on the grid. He was P2. He changed his tyres. Yeah, blew it off the line. It wasn't a good enough restart. How do we feel about this rule then? How do we feel about being able to change your tyres during a red flag?
I think it takes the racing out of racing. I think all racing should be done on track. Strategy should be made on track. I think the cars should be left, unless you've done it endanger a driver or other drivers, then the cars should be left in situ when the red flag comes out. It's not an opportunity to capitalize on someone's misfortune to the point where they've red flagged the track. By all means, do it underneath the safety car. But I think the only thing which should be done is the engineers come out, there's sufficient cooling for the cars so they don't damage them at all. Keep them, keeping that at a suitable temperature so they don't overheat. So like places like Singapore, they would catch fire if they were sat still for too long. And it was quite a hot day in Italy as well, compared to practice and qualifying. But I think they should just be left exactly how they were. What do you think?
Yeah, it seems to me that if the session is stopped,
then there's
a
key word there, isn't there?
Yeah, then it means that nothing should be going on other than what one would normally expect necessary to have a Formula One car come into the pits and stop. And that's it.
Good.
So
I'm glad we agree. It's one of those few things we do agree on.
I think it's going to be something that will probably be changed in the future, because it does seem a little bit of an unnecessary. Like, why is that even a thing? I don't really get it.
It doesn't happen too often.
No, true.
But this year it has, and it changed the shape of the race, and people aren't happy about it. And like you said, the session has stopped. Get the drivers out of the car. The drivers are out of the car, and they're making changes to the car. Like, it's mad. It's just, I'm conscious that the feedback on our last podcast was to try and keep it around an hour, and we could waffle on about this for a long time. And I'm sure some people would love it. So let us know if you do like it or not. But yeah, I think it should be stopped. If the session stopped, cars get parked up, adequately cooled, and then continue as you left them. And I
What
know
about the Hamilton penalty then?
Yes, and this I will happily talk about for a good 5 minutes because it deserves a conversation.
So Hamilton and Giovinazzi get a 10-second stop-go penalty for entering the pit lane when it was closed.
Yes. So I think there's two ways you can look at this. So bear with me 1 second, and you guys, listeners. You can look at this from a racing's perspective and what an advantage he has gained by boxing under, when the pit lane was closed. He obviously saved a lot of time, managed to come out in P2 or P3 with new tyres on, and was set for the rest of the race. I feel like if you're looking at it from a racing perspective, it's almost the same as speeding when you come into the pit box. You get a slap on the wrist, maybe plus 5 seconds, or a drive-through penalty at most. I think the penalty was so severe because it's safety, and it was a safety concern. The pit lane was closed because there were people walking about. There was a car being moved into the pit lane. Marshals putting their lives at risk by standing on a track where there's cars going around quite fast, in the hazard zone at least.
Marshals are always putting their lives at risk.
Absolutely.
Everybody does who's involved, really, to some extent.
And fair play to them. They put a lot of time and effort into those roles, and a lot of them do it for free as well. But Hamilton went through the pit lane when it was closed. He put those people at unnecessary risk. They closed that pit lane for a reason. So I think the 10-second penalty was due to the safety of, the rule, the ruling that the pit lane was closed for a safety reason, and he drove into it. So I think it was a bit harsh. He was P2 or P3, sorry, after the red flag, and no, he was P1, wasn't he? He was P1 after the red flag. I'm looking to you, Alex.
Yeah,
he was P1. So I think a drive-through penalty would have put him at the back of the grid, which is exactly what the stewards would have wanted, to him to take back the advantage he had gained. But a 10-second stop.
So you wanted him to get a drive-through instead of a stop-go?
Yeah. I don't think it warranted a added time onto the end, because Hamilton could make up that deficit within a couple of laps. If it was 5 or 10 seconds, he could have made that up. But I thought it was going to be a drive-through, not a 10-second stop and go. When was the last time you saw a 10-second stop and go? Apart from the video game.
I think the thing about the 10-second stop and go, yeah, you've already made the case for the safety argument, and that's that, of course, it is potentially very dangerous to be doing that. However, there's also the fact that someone may try and, sort of game the system to gain an unfair advantage. There's quite a few examples of people doing clever things. It makes me think of when Michael Schumacher had a penalty and he served it on the final lap of the race, but crossed the finish line in the process.
Interesting.
And so he won a race by crossing the racing line in the pits. He was officially the winner. Obviously, that's a different set of circumstances, but it makes me think of there's the potential for somebody to gain quite a considerable unfair advantage by entering the pit lane when it's closed.
By playing the game.
That's another reason why they might want to just say, look, the punishment for this has got to be slam it down. Because I don't think there is this assertion that the stewards are sort of making it up as they go along. There may be some of that going on. I'm not a steward, and I don't know any, so I don't really know. But they're following the guidelines that are set out. They're following the rules that are in the program. So that's presumably been decided as the punishment for safety reasons, but also because it's there is the potential to gain quite a significant advantage, and the 10-second stop go has got to be for the most serious infractions in both of those areas.
Absolutely. And Giovinazzi
it
got his...
happens so rarely as well. So.
Yeah, of course. And Giovinazzi got his penalty first because that was a slam dunk.
Incompetence too. It happened because of incompetence in both cases.
Yeah,
and incompetence that is potentially dangerous is just not acceptable in Formula One. You have to come down hard on it so that there's no danger of it happening.
And
I think people will be looking for those pit lane closed things from now
Oh,
on.
yeah. It won't be...
Fair play to all the teams that did.
Absolutely. I don't know how else to explain it. You've done a really good job. You've hit the nail on the head there. People will now be looking for those signs, even if they are on the left-hand side of a track whilst pulling 3G around a right-hand corner.
I know what you mean by saying that the drive-through is potentially just as bad in that situation, but that for me means that I think it is kind of justified. It's the most harsh possible penalty, really, aside from disqualifying them. It would be harsh if they disqualified him. Then it would be harsh.
To be fair,
he didn't really.
I almost thought they were going to do that at one point, just because it was taking so long. I thought, they must be edging on something quite bad here. But then,
that would be harsh.
Yeah, Antonio, his drive-through penalty came through first, stop and go, and then obviously they were looking to reassure Mercedes of the 10-second stop and go before they published it, gave them video evidence, and then they were like, well, can't argue that. Hamilton box.
Yeah, it's I think disqualification should be left for when someone's done something malicious that's also dangerous and all the like. Someone who's actually genuinely trying to cause harm or something like that.
Yeah,
that would have been harsh.
I completely agree.
So Hamilton has to box. Take a 10-second drive-through penalty. It puts him at the back of the grid, and he is how far? I don't remember exactly how far he was behind the pack. I think it was about 30 seconds.
30 seconds from P1, wasn't it? No, it can't have been. Because the pit stop's 20 seconds.
I'm pretty sure it was 30 seconds from the back of the grid.
Yeah, I think you're right. And he did it on the first lap as well. He said he could build up a 5-second gap, and he built up 2.5 seconds and then boxed that lap. So clearly a change in strategy. Just wanted to get onto new tyres. Came out 30 seconds behind. Presumably would have been one of the Williams drivers or potentially Grosjean, since Magnussen was out. I think it was Grosjean actually.
I think it was Grosjean.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was a long way. He was a long way behind.
Oh, I've got a little note here saying Hamilton is back out on track after his penalty and in last place, 29 seconds behind Gasly, and he's got 23 seconds to make up the difference. So
behind Gasly?
Yeah. That's what this says here on Autosport. Is that correct?
Behind Gasly, who was in the lead of the race.
Yes,
perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think maybe he wasn't 30 seconds behind the pack. He must have been 30 seconds behind the leader, perhaps.
But the pack would have been within 10 seconds of each other, like P1 to P16, because it was just after the race restart. Yeah. So maybe that's right. Yep. And he did put out 2.5 seconds, 3 seconds before that race. So yeah, that adds up. So he came out.
The long and short of it is that he plows through. He begins to plow through the field, basically.
And I don't want to sound like a Hamilton fanboy, but what a drive! Fantastic. Didn't make contact with anyone, just flew past him. I know he's got a fantastic car and all, but actually, is it a good track for overtaking? Yeah, it's got some pretty good DRS straights, but they weren't all down into turn one. Some of them were, around not going through Ascari, but on the exit of Ascari, before Ascari, for the Lesmo. It was, absolutely fantastic drive. Did I expect him to get to P7? Nope. I wanted him to get P10.
I was fully prepared for him to get on the podium. Actually, I was knowing Hamilton, he'll do something nutty and somehow get on the podium.
If only they had party mode.
They could have wrapped that car. If they had that, would they have been able to do that?
Exactly.
It's possible. Anyway, they didn't. But it still highlighted like how good Hamilton is and how, as it currently stands, just Bottas is just there. He's stuck behind. He was stuck behind Ocon, I believe, for a bit. Then he was stuck behind Ricardo. Ricardo had overtaken him earlier in the race. It just showed that Hamilton, he wasn't using some fancy engine mode. He had the same car and he made it happen.
Just driving.
Setup was different, perhaps.
Yeah, and he had a couple of overheating issues I heard on the radio, but managed it or ignored it. I don't know which one. Probably a little bit of both, to be honest, knowing Hamilton. But he was lapping when he came out the pit stop on a fresh set of tyres, 1.5 seconds faster than anyone else on the grid. So rapid. That's what clean air does for you around Monza, I guess. You're good if you've got a little bit of a slipstream, but actually clean air is probably worth more than that, especially on the race.
I really enjoyed Grosjean's valiant attempt to retake Hamilton after Hamilton had overtaken him into the Rettifilo. That was good.
Yeah, that was good. I also enjoyed Raikkonen was like P3 for a while. Got a little bit excited. I was like, ooh, ooh, will it happen? Will the Alfa Romeo get a podium? This could be massive for Kimi. I was so wrong. It was unreal. As soon as I thought
Yeah,
that, he went backwards by about 10 positions in 2 laps.
Yeah, that car's not good. That car's nowhere near good enough to be holding on to those places.
It's not good, but they'll probably take great gratitude knowing that they held P3 for a lap or two.
Yeah.
But yeah, went down the pack. So you've got Gasly in P1, you've got Sainz in P2, and with 19 laps to go, he had a 4-second gap up until Gasly. So 4 seconds to make up in 19 laps on very similar pace cars, if you ask me.
Yeah, it certainly seemed that way at Monza.
Mm.
There was, earlier on in the race, we had seen the McLarens in a really good position. At one point, it looked like it could have even been both McLarens on the podium, and the possibility of a 1-2 was even on the cards at some points. We saw some really good overtaking from Sainz after all this red flag and restart business. We saw him overtaking Raikkonen. That was a really good overtake, both of them showing their respect and experience and maturity as drivers, because it was really tight and nearly made contact.
I tell you what, sorry to butt in, but Stroll's overtake on Raikkonen going into the second chicane,
yeah, that was good.
Absolutely fantastic. He gets a lot of criticism, but they were, you couldn't have put a piece of paper between them. But what a lunge and what an overtake! Yeah. He just stuck it right around the outside of that, the first part of the chicane, and then whipped it up the inside of the second part. I thought, what, fair play to you, mate. He
did also nearly smash into the pack after the restart in that same place earlier on, though, which was a bit scary.
You're not wrong. He went straight on, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he just kind of outbraked himself and realised he needed to go down the escape road.
I think he must have locked a wheel or something, because he went off track a little bit to get down that escape road. So, but yeah, I was really impressed with his overtake on Kimi. Kimi's good at defending, and especially you wouldn't think of overtaking someone in that part of the track. That's probably the 10% you probably wouldn't overtake someone, but Stroll managed to do it, and I thought it was pretty good, to be honest.
Of course, Verstappen ended up pitting. We barely even really mentioned Red Bull so far because they were, like I said, they were completely absent in this race. Verstappen obviously had to DNF. Some kind of engine problem. He wasn't very happy, but also he wasn't really doing much when he was racing.
I can't remember where he was on the race, to be honest.
He was like 7th or 6th.
Yeah, just
for quite some time.
I know it's a power circuit, and
overtaken.
It's not suited to them, but they were absolutely nowhere. And at this point, Albon's still in the race. Well, Albon finished the race, but there was nothing to really distinguish what they were doing in that race at all. Didn't even hear them on the team radio or anything. So when he did retire, didn't look too happy. Jumped out of the car before they even put the dolly wheels underneath, and just walked through the garage. And I thought, he's clearly not happy about that. I think Dr. Helmut Marko turned around and said his championship hopes are over.
Nice.
I thought, well,
thanks, Helmut.
I don't want to sound like a pessimist here, but 50. He was just shy of 50 points behind Hamilton. Last race, and obviously Hamilton had that penalty this race, so it could have been 25 points by the end of the race. But yeah, anything can happen. But I thought that was a bit harsh.
Yeah, that's vintage Helmut Marko, isn't it?
Yeah, classic.
There's nothing between his brain and his mouth. It just comes straight out. For better and worse. So so obviously we end up with this incredible situation where Pierre Gasly is leading the Italian Grand Prix.
The guy who got dropped this time last year from Red Bull Racing is now leading the Monza, the Italian Grand Prix, like you said. Let's just let that sink in. He got dropped this time last year.
Then we have Sainz. He has to get past Raikkonen. It takes him a little bit longer than it really should. He doesn't quite make it happen early enough. That cost him, because as he said to his engineer, why for that? I cannot really understand why his race engineer was saying, "Oh, you can be patient." No, Sainz couldn't win this race.
And what a fantastic response as well.
Yeah.
Be careful. Be patient with Raikkonen. I want to chase Gasly. I've got my eye on Gasly.
He was like, I want to win this, Tom.
Yeah, and I was like, that's bold. That's a good response. That's a racing response.
Yeah,
and
that's what a racing driver wants to do.
What I loved is, for the last couple of races, it's always been like, let's focus on Hamilton and Bottas, P1 and P2, even though they're 6 seconds apart. How close is Bottas getting? We had that camera on that McLaren for a good 6 laps, and I loved every single second of it. Sainz was driving that McLaren to its full potential. Like he was, like rightly or wrongly, he was sliding out of some corners and he was putting that foot down as quick as he could, and it was working. He was gaining and he was gaining and he was gaining and he was gaining. And I tell you what,
But like I said, I was stood up for the whole second half of the race.
absolutely mental. That McLaren looked like an absolute dream to drive. He was in full control of that car and it was doing exactly what he wanted it to do. And it was so precise as well. Each lap he was like 2 tenths here, 2.5 tenths there, 1 tenth here. And I was like, he's going to do it. I thought he's going to do it. And
he was taking it out of the lead really consistently. And
yes.
Obviously, I don't think I've actually made it clear. It is on my Twitter profile, but if you haven't seen it, like I am a McLaren fan. So I obviously wanted Sainz to do it. And, I was urging it on, but then I'm there and I'm thinking, Pierre Gasly is leading the Italian Grand Prix. Like I almost don't want Sainz to do it. Like, but I really do.
It's
I
like
would have loved to see so many the drivers win that race, but
incredible stuff. Like, I can't believe how much.
Is there anything else that happens before we get to the end of the race? I mean, I've got on my notes here Latifi in P11 on lap 35, and then lots of exclamation marks.
Yes, I said to Hannah actually, I was like, if Latifi scores a point, I will like eat my hat. I will lose my temper. I will throw a tantrum because George is such a superior driver against all his teammates the last 2 years. I think he was better than Kubica, if you ask me.
Wasn't it like 29? Wasn't it 20-1 or something in races?
Yeah. And I thought if Latifi scores a point, I'm like, how gutted will George be? How absolutely gutted will George be? Just because of the red flag and the safety car. But
I'd have to take back all of my Latifi.
You would do. We'd have to delete all the previous episodes.
All of my Latifi sass would be yeah. So he was in P11 at one point. Where did he finish? I've kind of forgotten where he finished, if I'm honest.
Let's have a quick
I don't have it right
look
in front of me, but I remember being impressed at that. I also obviously remarked that we had the Alfa Romeos as the leading Ferrari engine cars again.
He finished P11.
He did. Oh yeah, he did finish P11. Okay, good. Yeah, so like
10 seconds
wasn't
behind
really,
P10 though.
Yeah, he was not really in any danger of like neither Williams looked racy enough to overtake. I mean, Russell had a look a couple of times. He was in the slipstream of a couple of people, but then as soon as he pulled out, the car's just like, no, I'm going all the way back here now. Like,
yeah. Oh, it was
so.
It's not a good car to drive that Williams at the moment, is it? It's like it's got no aerodynamics on it. It was like, oh, yeah, I'm gaining in the slipstream. Pull out. Oh no, just hit a brick wall.
So then we. I also have here on my notes that it was an incredible sight, the restart grid.
Mm.
Can you imagine if that was the actual start of the race grid? We got an Alfa Tauri and an Alfa Romeo in the front 2 rows. Like
mad, absolutely mad.
What is this restart?
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Okay, well, obviously we're gonna get into the gushing now. So
I'm gonna let you take this because you're
Pierre Gasly wins
passionate.
the Italian Grand Prix. The echoes of Monza 2008. Sebastian Vettel is the youngest race winner ever. He wins in a Toro Rosso, which is like a sort of middle of the pack at the very most kind of car. The Toro Rosso was actually better than the Red Bull at first. They actually had a better car. I think probably because of the Minardi takeover was probably a smoother ride than the Jaguar takeover. I suppose it would have been Jaguar that Red Bull bought. So they you've got this incredible history where they've done it all over again. It's the first French driver to win since
1997.
Yeah, 1996. Monaco 96, Olivier Panis, I was trying to remember his name. Yeah, obviously who won in similar circumstances, this kind of nobody expected him to win in the Ligier of all the cars. Gasly 100% deserves the win. I don't normally, I've said so many times that like deserve doesn't really have anything to do with it in Formula One. And I kind of still stand by that, but I understand why somebody would say that he deserves to win because he has had, the most difficult 18 months. He himself has said it. His P2 in Brazil last season was incredible enough. He was incredibly fortunate in a lot of ways. He didn't drive bad. He had a good race. Like he drove very consistently, but he was much better in, say, Belgium in terms of how hard he raced and the like of it. I think he just was super consistent. He knows that car. It's a car that clearly does well on these tracks. But nobody is going to begrudge Pierre Gasly this victory. Like, we heard the Italian anthem at Monza nonetheless.
Yeah,
The
it happened
Italian
for the second year on the road. For the second year on the road, we've had the Italian national anthem.
Yeah.
I can't really put it into words, to be honest. It was.
Did you applaud? I
I
applauded.
did. I was just standing up on my feet. I applauded the TV, and I just like, you know what? I can't believe that's just happened. It's terrible. After a week after I watched the race, I usually just go back on my Skybox and just delete the previous race. I'm going to keep that for a long time, that race, because it was special. That top three, there's a lot of photos going around on social media of like Gasly sat on that top step, and he turned around and said, I didn't want to leave the podium because it was just something incredible. Like, he's a race winner at the Italian Grand Prix. I just wanted to soak it in. And he sat there for like 2 or 3 minutes after like done the interviews and done the celebrations. He just sat there and just soaked it all in. And I thought that speaks volume. By doing absolutely nothing, that has spoke so much volume. And
I'm pretty sure I saw him. I was trying to lip read what he was saying. I'm pretty sure he was saying, "Am I dreaming?"
Yeah, and
I'm sure I saw him saying the word dreaming.
I don't want to sound like a child, but magical. Absolutely magical. Like, everyone who watched that race, no matter who you support or what fan you are. I think Lewis is a great driver. I'm British, so I support him naturally. I've followed him for years. But wow, what a mix-up. What a mix-up. If you take Mercedes out of the equation, Red Bull had a terrible race. Ferrari were non-existent. And you've got a superb race with an equally superb finish. And oh my goodness, just the emotion when you see a driver who's not been on the top step of the podium, got lucky last year with the second step, but did well last year to get second. And like you said, he's had such a rough 18 months. Coming off the back of Spa, which would have been really emotional for him, and getting a win in an AlphaTauri. Wow, just incredible. I think I'll cherish this moment for a long time, and I'll look back on this podcast and just see the constant smiles. Like I said, if you're not watching this on YouTube, there's just a constant grin on Alex's face, and I'm just mimicking it. It's just the grin of, yes, Formula One is back, and this is exactly what we want it to be. Can't wait till next week when it's back to 1-2 Mercedes.
Well, before I get in, because I said I was going to talk a bit about that and I was going to get a bit philosophical about it. Before I do that, I'm going to just mention, I think it's the first time we've heard the French national anthem on the podium since 2008.
Wow.
I think, which would have been Alonso winning in the USA, because obviously he drove for Renault. So
yes, of course, yeah.
But yeah, obviously we've talked about first French driver to win, but in terms of constructors anthem, I think it's 2008. Okay, so I've seen some talk online of this being justification, and they talked about it on the program as well. I think Martin Brundle mentioned it about this being a justification for giving reverse grids a go, or some kind of alteration to the format. But isn't it actually the opposite of that? Isn't it actually demonstrating that we don't need to mess around with the format in order to get excellent races? I think we've already had several brilliant races this season, and not every race can be a massive blockbuster. I mean, what happened in Monza this year is magical. Like you said, it's absolutely incredible. It's a historic race. I'm going to remember this race for as long as I'm a Formula One fan, no doubt. But not every race can be that. It's just not. It's not possible. It doesn't really reflect. It doesn't really reflect real life. Not every day can be the best day ever. Sometimes a lot of what you got to do is get into the finish line by just getting the job done. Yeah. And that is generally what a lot of Formula One is. It's just having the consistency to get the job done. I'm a Formula One fan. I just want to see racing. I want to see good racing. I'm happy when it's on. I kind of just accept that not every single race can be this historic, incredible thing. I think we've got to, I don't know, I feel like as a society, we've got to try and be more patient. We've got to try and accept that there are going to be races that are not the most incredible thing you've ever seen. There's so much interesting stuff to see in Formula One that it's not just about whether or not we're seeing the same people drive. And I've said before that Hamilton's racing is going to be remembered in the future as we were lucky to see it happen. I'm just happy to take that for granted, and it makes races like the ones we just had all the more special for it. If every race is special, then no race is special. So I think it's not justification for messing with the format that much. I don't think it's justification for reverse grids. I wouldn't want to see that. It would take a lot of convincing to make me want to see anything like that. And I think the reason this race is special is because so much of what we have to do in elite level of sport is having that consistency into, I just love the process. So I decided to get a little bit philosophical about it and say that, it wouldn't reflect real life almost if we demand that every race be really special, because you've got to just get out there and get the job done sometimes.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't need to add anything to that because it's true. What you said is absolutely true. And like you said, if every race was as good as that one, then that would become the normal and then that wouldn't be interesting. So
I just don't think it's possible. I don't think it's a
not
possibility.
And as for reverse
it's
grids,
yin and yang, isn't it? You get light and dark. You can't have one without the other.
As for reverse grids, I don't think it needs to happen. It would be nice maybe after the Formula One season has concluded that there is a mandatory reverse grid race just for the sake of it.
A reverse championship standing grid exhibition race.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe a charity event.
Yeah. Maybe they can actually tell us what they're doing with this We Racers One initiative. I still don't know.
Where's all this money going? The problem is we would do this reverse race and it would probably be an absolute banger and then people would demand it. So let's scratch that. Let's keep Formula One as it is. We'll have some good races. We'll have some get the job done races and we'll have some absolute stunners like we've just had.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I can't think of a single sport where every single session or event in that sport is some world-changing, incredible event. Like I've seen some incredibly boring football matches, and I've seen football matches that have made me thankful for being alive. So that's sport.
I've been, like you said, just touching on that, being at the pub for the World Cup, and England have a really good game, and everyone's going wild. There's beer going everywhere. It's absolutely fantastic. I'll go down 2 weeks later to watch the next round and it's a 0-0 game and it's just boring. But so yeah, it happens in every single sport.
Yeah, you think it's bad watching the Formula One? Try being an English national football team supporter.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so that's kind of what happens with the race. That's the checkered flag, isn't it? We have the magic and we have the podium. We have Gasly taking it all in with the other two. It was really nice to see them all sitting together having a little chat on the podium. I know it's a shame that we had no fans. That's the reality of it. It kind of made it a beautiful moment in its own right, to be honest.
It was quiet.
Gasly it probably was serene.
Yeah, just sat there with his head in his hands and thought, is this real? I'm not being deafened by hundreds of thousands of Tifosi which turn up. It must have been a strange silence. It must have been a really strange... Well, of course it's going to be strange. He's just a race winner. He's a F1 race winner now, so... Yeah.
They turn the music up a bit, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. He sat underneath that massive F1 sign, just in case no one noticed what sport it was. Have you seen how big it was? It was huge. I saw that on Twitter beforehand.
No, didn't you see in the World Cup final last time? They just had football in huge words at the other end of the stadium. Just
Speaking
in case you
about,
weren't sure.
what did you see? Did you see at the end of qualifying there was a banner with Lewis Hamilton, 90th Grand Prix winner, at the top of qualifying? They published published the wrong signage by the end of qualifying. It was hilarious, and Mercedes has now tweeted F1 saying you jinxed it.
Well, that video that we got from Dave that we played earlier, obviously at the beginning of it, he said, "You're coming, with Monza coming up." Just to explain, he sent that between the recording of the last episode and this one, so that's why we couldn't put it in the last episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, he wasn't. Obviously, Hamilton wasn't to get it, wasn't to get that 90th win.
Yeah, so still got 2 more to go. So send in the same video, but change it to the next race.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. But yeah, fantastic stuff. Anything else to add on the post-race discussion?
Yeah,
or
I think that just the other thing I've got here to add was Hamilton. I think was probably pretty. He seemed a little bit distracted during his post-race interview, even though he was, he's very gracious in victory overall. He said that he took responsibility for what happened with his penalty. He congratulated Gasly, who went by. He seemed generally quite humble about the whole thing. But Lewis Hamilton now has 8 penalty points.
Yes, out of a maximum of 12, which you can
He
obtain.
is 4 penalty points away from being disqualified from the next race.
2 get expunged, though, in November, which is
Yes.
it's a couple of months off. Got a fair few races between here and then.
So I think he might have been a bit distracted because of that, because that's actually pretty, for a man who wants to win the championship, that could really cause some damage. I mean,
it's a threat, isn't it?
It's, yeah. Hamilton wants the absolute best. He wants to win, but he also wants to be. I genuinely believe that Lewis Hamilton wants to be a winner who knows that he's gonna win fair and that he's gonna try and not be a. He does. I don't think he wants to be a bad guy, if you know what I mean. Like some racing drivers just don't care and just like I will do anything to win. Like Michael Schumacher, basically. Michael Schumacher was just total competition. Michael Schumacher was like, whatever it takes, I will. And
he relished it, didn't he? He absolutely relished it.
He loved it. Yeah. He loved it.
It made him better.
It made him the best in the world. Like nobody could really touch him for quite a lot of the time. I mean, that's another conversation. But
yeah,
I think Hamilton genuinely wants to kind of be the good, fair racer. I think he genuinely believes that. He may not always be perfect at it, but I believe that he wants that.
His racecraft has certainly changed throughout the last 12 years. When did he start? 2007. Yep, 2007.
He's matured a hell of a lot.
So 13 years, his racecraft has completely changed, and you can see it year in, year out. So, yeah, completely agree. So, wow, that was a piece of work. That was. We're over and done now with the pre-race discussion.
In the best possible way.
Yeah, it was amazing. We were just saying, oh, wow, that was just fantastic. Anyway, moving on now to our driver of the day and the championship standings. Starting with the driver of the day. Alex, name a driver, your driver of the day.
Carlos Sainz.
Carlos Sainz. I thought we were going to agree. It's so hard, isn't it?
I think it's tempting to want to give it to Gasly. It's tempting to give it to Gasly, I know, but I think in terms of individual performance on the race, Carlos Sainz had an absolute banger of the race. He nailed both starts. He was able to get, apart from not getting past Raikkonen quick enough, he was able to get the job done. And he showed incredible composure for someone who is, that car and that driver have not spent a whole lot of time in those kind of upfront positions, really, if you think about the totality of his career. And he showed real confidence when he was in P2 in the early stages of the race. And McLaren should be really happy with the overall performance. And I think as an individual performance, like Sainz did the best. Gasly raced very consistently, but a lot of what he got out of that race was kind of due to circumstance combined with his consistency
of course,
with his sort of knowledge of that car. His only real overtake I can think of was at the restart where he went past Stroll.
Yep, fair enough.
That's the only overtake I can think of. The rest of it was people in the pits. So Gasly, nobody could begrudge that win. He's had a really tough time and he's been fantastic since he's left that Red Bull. So, I don't begrudge Gasly at all, but driver of the day, Carlos Sainz.
And I was going to go Pierre Gasly just because I think it was absolutely spectacular and magical. I don't use that word.
You're going to say Kevin Magnussen now, aren't you?
I'm going to go, yeah. No, I'm going to go Carlos Sainz actually, because what I enjoyed more about that race than anything else was just the pure pleasure of watching those McLaren onboards for the final couple of laps and him pushing so hard and that car responding so well. It wasn't just, when you watch the Mercedes go around, it sticks to the tarmac like it's on rails. Like it doesn't, the back end doesn't slide out. It doesn't lose.
It's like a Sky Electrics car. Yeah, it's just following the perfect racing line every time.
It just going through Ascari, it's absolutely mental. And coming off the back corner, all the other cars were 2 wheels off, trying to get as much speed as possible, and Mercedes was just like middle of the track. Doesn't matter, we're fast. But watching that McLaren, those last couple of laps, absolutely spectacular. Gave me like 2008 kind of vibes.
And this wasn't with some engine being turned up. I know they would have been doing stuff with the energy recovery system, but this wasn't like they just banged the engine up to 11 and were like, right, off you go, mate.
This is the same engine they've been using for the whole race. Yeah, which makes it even better. And the fact that he got so close and didn't get it, it just makes it all.
He didn't do enough. He just didn't do enough. He should have got past Raikkonen quicker.
Yeah, it would have given an extra lap or two. So,
that was just the case of it. He just didn't. Either the gap was too big, he couldn't overcome it. He didn't really do enough with Raikkonen. He just didn't get there in the end. But it's still a fantastic result. It's still an absolutely fantastic
McLaren
result.
doing superbly this year.
Yeah.
Which moves us on.
Couldn't ask for more, really, this year.
Yeah, which is Yeah, it's so good. And that moves us on to the championship standings.
Yep.
Which I don't have in front of me. Oh dear.
Well, the thing is, the standings haven't, it's not changed that much.
No.
Really. Stroll is now 4th.
Norris has been knocked down, has he?
So Norris has been knocked down to 5th.
Yep.
I think they have the same number of points, but he finished 2nd and Norris finished 3rd. So Stroll gets to go ahead.
Sure.
Bottas overtakes Verstappen.
Yep, because Verstappen DNF'd, didn't he? So
I'll say nothing much has happened. I suppose a few things have happened.
Yeah, so I've got the results now. So yeah, Bottas overtook Verstappen, which is, it is what it is now within 50 points of Hamilton. It's almost like for the top 2 or the top 3, nothing's really changed, really. It's only a couple of points here and there. What's really interesting is...
the gaps haven't really changed that much, yeah.
Oh, Stroll and Norris are both on 57 points.
Yeah.
And Stroll's sat in P4 at the moment, 4th in the championship.
Gasly obviously pops up to 8th.
Yes, crazy. And Ricciardo sat in P10 and is on 41 points. So actually, the midfield battle is looking incredible.
The midfield battle this year, all year, has been incredible.
Yeah, and it's only going to get better. Formula 1.5 is going to be a banger this year. Don't miss it, because it's going to go right down to the wire. Can't say the same about Formula 1.0.
No, Mercedes, we've already established they're in Formula 0.
They're
in
Formula
their
0.
own category.
Yeah.
But as I said before when we were talking about, can't have every race be amazing. We've had some brilliant races this year. I know, like, Spain was a bit of a snoozer. Like, there wasn't loads going on there. But, like, the first 2 races, the British Grand Prix with the tyre disaster and everything, like, it was...
Yeah,
I think it's been great. I've been loving this season.
It has been good, to be fair. And we should be thankful that it's happening at all.
Yeah, we should.
You're
absolutely right.
We got to June and there have been no races, so it's a good job that we've got some races, and I'm thankful for everyone who makes it possible. Even the COVID test guy was jumping with the AlphaTauri lot, and I thought, wow, what a guy! He's already part of the team, getting involved.
I cannot be socially distanced from my joy.
Yeah, they all form a bubble anyway, don't they? So it's all good. But yeah,
I've no doubt that loads of guidelines were being broken. Unfortunately, I think that was probably happening.
But they'll all get tested, but before they leave the track, and they'll get tested before they enter the new track venue. So they'll have 2 tests in the space of 5 days. So it's very well regulated. But let's not get too bogged down about COVID. Try and keep it a little bit more positive. But yeah, championship standings haven't changed too much, and
the gaps are much the same. Hamilton's still very solidly in the lead.
Yeah, so we won't talk about that too much. It's still no points for Williams, unfortunately. George Russell will get that point by the end of the year. Hopefully.
I think that's
doable.
It's doable. Yeah.
It's doable.
It's doable.
I hope it happen. It's a shame it didn't happen whilst Claire and Frank were at the top of the, that would have been a dream, but it's not to happen. It's Formula 1, it's cutthroat sport. So I think he deserves a point. He's a good driver. So I'll say this at the end of every podcast. But that's all I've got to say on the championship standings. Anything else which stands out for you, Alex?
No, I think that's about it for standings. Thank you very much for joining us for this fantastic discussion of this race. I kind of feel like I'm slapping myself a bit on the back there, but I've just enjoyed it. I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. We're only 2 in, and it's fantastic. I'm really enjoying it. I hope you are too. If you are, then maybe you'll consider subscribing to us on YouTube. Leave us a comment as well on your thoughts on the race. If you're listening to us on the podcast, the audio-only version, please give us a rating and a review wherever it is you get your podcast. That really helps out the show. You can follow us on Twitter at RacePerMinute, and you can contact us on there via DMs or however you want to do it. Don't forget that you can send us, like Dave did, you just send us a video or just a recording of yourself if you've got questions or comments, and we'll get you on the show. And you can email us as well, info@raceperminute.com. Also, if you really like what we do and you really want to support the show to the absolute limit, then you could consider supporting us on Patreon. We do have patreon.com/RacePerMinute, where for just £1 you can help support the show and get your name on our website and access to our Discord and all that sort of stuff. So if that interests you, then take a look at that. Thanks very much for joining us. We hope to see you next time. Can't guarantee it'll be as good as this race. But we hope to see you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.